Now here's Newton Bateman, and Newton Bateman, scholar. So what do we have? We have a scroll. This is, you can even see the little, in the lines in the end, it's definitely a scroll. And this would be something appropriate for a great scholar.
Yeah. And then also was this the one who's president?
He was president, yeah.
Was he a professor first?
No, actually he'd been superintendent of instruction for the state of Illinois. He had been to Jacksonville and Illinois College, started out as a county superintendent down there, and then he moved up to, in the old state capitol, the old one, they still have, his name is on one of the doors. He was superintendent of public instruction. And Knox College hired him away from that position, brought him up here. And another young man who worked his way through school, didn't have a lot of money behind him. But I'll just mention what he did. During his years as president of Knox College, graduated students went on to have distinguished careers. A short list would include John H. Finley, who became president of Knox and then later New York Times editor. Janet Grieg Post, and we know about all the great philanthropy particularly that was done by Janet Grieg Post. Philip Sidney Post Jr., who was an attorney. He was corporate attorney for International Harvester and died young, and then his wife, Janet Grieg Post, took up the work that he had started, and then a couple of years she became Knox trustee, as he had been. She didn't immediately fill his position. His position was filled with another person, but the next time there was an opening, then she took that position. And during Bateman's years would have been Samuel McClure, S.S. McClure, we've already talked about. John S. Phillips, who was McClure's business partner, involved in the magazine. Harriet Hurd McClure, also involved in that publication. Robert Mather, he had various positions at railroad. He worked his way into CEO of a railroad. Another guy came here with not much money. He came from Utah and got out here, started working a railroad as a laborer, and eventually became the CEO of one of them. I don't remember.
So
and then
from Utah came east.
Yeah, a little different. And then how he found out about Knox College, I'd like to know that. So anyway, let's see. Oh yeah, and then Ernest Elmo Calkins, you've probably heard of him. So these are great people that did a lot for the college. And Avery, and we talked about. Now, when they built Alumni Hall, they had 3 building committees. The Nautii and the Delphi, and then the central part was called the students, alumni. Yeah. That was actually the alumni part. Well, Cyrus Minor Avery was the head of the committee for the central part representing the alumni. And so poor old E.E. Myers, the architect, had to work with 3 separate building committees that each gave him their list of desires, and he had to coordinate it, and that's why we've abandoned the old floor plan, because it was like 3 separate buildings. You went up or down all the time. So anyway, they dropped the floors, saved the shell, and I'm glad they did. This is the only place in the world you can stand in one spot and see 2 E.E. Myers buildings, because E.E. Myers was also the designer of our courthouse. He was born in New Jersey. His father was a weaver who was facing competition at the textile mills, so he apparently was still doing a lot of looming by hand. Anyway, and then he died in Illinois when Newton was 6 years old, so here's another guy who started out with hard times, But he graduated from Illinois College, where he earned his way through school by chopping wood. So he must have had a great set of arms and shoulders. He was only about 5'4". He was really he and Lincoln knew each other in Springfield, and of course Lincoln's a foot taller than this guy. And supposedly Newton Bateman was the last man in Springfield to shake Lincoln's hand as he boarded the train to go to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And he would see Newton Bateman, he'd say, "Oh, there's my friend, little Newton Bateman, the biggest schoolmaster in Illinois."
Oh.
Yeah, they had an affectionate relationship.
Yeah.
Anyway, he anticipated a career in the clergy. He attended Lane Seminary in Cincinnati, Ohio, was forced to drop out due to lack of funds. So he was Knox College's first president who was not an ordained minister.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
After leaving Lane Seminary, he turned his attention toward teaching. He taught at various schools, conducted a private school of his own in St. Louis, but left that to become superintendent of schools in Morgan County, Illinois, back in Jacksonville. But very soon after that, won an election to become Illinois State Superintendent of Education, and he moved to Springfield. Lincoln was still living in Springfield. It is said that Lincoln conducted his political campaigns in a room at the state capitol, which was adjacent to Newton Bateman's. In that office, you can still identify, I say the name's on the door. And Lincoln and Bateman became friends, and Lincoln felt comfortable in confiding in Bateman about very personal matters. If you visit the old state capitol, you can see that door. Bateman advocated and eventually created the schools that became University of Illinois and Illinois State University. Yeah, Bateman was barely 5 feet tall, and Lincoln was 6 feet 4 inches tall. Lincoln referred to Bateman as my little friend, the biggest schoolmaster in Illinois. And reportedly, Bateman was the last one to shake Lincoln's hand the day he left Springfield to go to Washington, D.C. And later, Bateman's friendship with Robert Todd Lincoln would be beneficial to Knox College in establishing a military officers training program. That was something that was introduced by Bateman through cooperation with Robert Todd Lincoln. And then in Bateman's later years, he added and partly authored history books of various counties in Illinois, including Knox County. That book, he and W. Selden Gill published about Knox County in 1899, is still a valuable reference. And I should have mentioned this when I mentioned Comstock. There, even from the get-go, even though Reverend Gale's vision was more oriented toward the teaching of clergymen, that was what he was thinking, but it didn't really go that way. And when I mentioned Hurd and all the analytical math and the sciences and everything, this shows you that Knox is, from an early day, starting to lean more toward, it's in a liberal arts context, where there would still have been all the ancient languages and religion and everything like that you wanted to study, but they were adding to it to get it more rounded. So very few of the early Knox graduates became ministers. More of them became doctors, lawyers, educators, of course, some farmers, and not that many clergymen.